Welcome to the Weekly Dose Podcast, your one-stop shop for the weekly news in incretin mimetic therapies, with your host, man on the Manjaro, Dave Knapp. Welcome to a special edition of On the Pen, the Weekly Dose. Today we're coming at you with a update on the Novo Nordisk Q4 earnings call. I'm Dave Knapp, man on the Manjaro. That's why I am here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Manjaro, Zepbound. That pen is the pen that you're on, and that's why you're here. But today we are doing a special podcast, a special edition of the Weekly Dose where we're covering the Q4 Novo Nordisk earnings call, and we're going to jump right into it. There is some interesting news to get to. If you have followed On the Pen with Man on the Manjaro for any amount of time, you've seen these done before. I've been doing them for the Eli Lilly earnings calls. There'll be one in a couple days here to cover for Eli Lilly, but this is Novo Nordisk call, and it was just too good not to cover it. So if you are here, let me know in the chat. Dink is here. Welcome. I hope that you've all had the chance to check out my new weekly podcast called The Weekly Dose. And it is just a 15-minute roundup of the weekly news in incretin mimetic therapies. And obviously, we have to do a special one because this is going to take up a full 15 minutes. So some bonus material here. If you're new here, put an N in the chat next to your name. Let me know that you're new here. I'd love to welcome you by name. If you're listening to this on the podcast, please make sure you get a 5-star rating and review. And if you want to check the video version of this out, because there will be some slides to show you, make sure that you go over to my YouTube channel and subscribe to the On the Pen with Man on the Manjaro page. Welcome, Secondine. Welcome, Pamela. Welcome, Dink. Good to have you here. So let's jump right into it. So this is the Q4 earnings call. Let's just, cut right to the chase. Novo Nordisk made a ton of money. They continued to make a ton of money, and they're making money off the backs of their incretin mimetic therapies, also known as Ozempic and Wegovy. And I think that there's just some really, really interesting news to cover here. So last year, the market saw a 30% expansion in GLP-1 treatments for diabetes, which is a huge expansion. Novo Nordisk still maintains 54% market share in that space, which is just absolutely astounding, especially given how many people have to be leaving their platform for the Lilly option, Manjaro. And Lilly has done a much better job in their rollout, even though they have definitely dealt with their own supply constraints. They've done a lot better job than Novo Nordisk has, but Novo Nordisk, nonetheless, having been in the market with the Ozempic. And then, of course, before that, you have Victoza, the two GLP-1 treatments offered by Novo Nordisk. They maintain 54% market share in the GLP-1 space for diabetes, which is huge. They have seen a double in the obesity treatment market. And there's a really interesting graph that I wanted to share with you all today that just kind of shows where the market share is. And I think you'll see probably the same thing that I see on this graph here. There is let's see here. Bear with me. Nope. I didn't get it uploaded. Awesome. Well, I didn't get it uploaded, but basically what you see is you see this big jump in the last couple of months for Zepbound scripts, which are definitely, I think they'll continue to show these graphs until it's not beneficial to them. You'll see Eli Lilly overtake the Wegovy treatments for sure. Today we heard that Eli Lilly is writing 40,000 prescriptions a week of Zepbound. Brace for shortages of Zepbound, please. But this isn't a Lilly call. I'm sort of a Lilly fanboy, but it was an interesting slide to see because there's just this little green thing at the bottom. You see it's going straight up, and that is the Zepbound script. So Eli Lilly is poised to obviously take some of that market share away from Novo Nordisk. But Novo Nordisk is going to continue to scratch and claw. They did announce that they have doubled their manufacturing of Wegovy, the early doses. So there's been a huge shortage. They put an emphasis on maintaining the 2.4 so that they could continue to provide the 2.4 pens to people who've been on the treatment for a long time. But they've doubled their output over the prior couple of months of the early doses of Wegovy. But I just want to remind you of some basic math that 0 times 2 is still 0. So we'll see. We'll see if we see any actual real world impact on that in the community. But they definitely were focused on reassuring investors that they're putting tons and tons of effort into improving, especially their API manufacturing. API short for active pharmaceutical ingredient, and just increasing the amount of partners that they work with to produce semaglutide, as well as some major investments that we've already covered on this channel into additional manufacturing facilities that they expect by 2025 will be producing more of the active ingredients. But yeah, it's the way down the road that those huge investments are gonna actually play out in the real world. The STEP trials, there was some interesting news on the STEP trials. You saw that there was some top level data released for the treatment of osteoarthritis and the treatment of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, which is just, I'm not a cardiologist, but basically just heart failure, cardiovascular disease. This is really good news for those of you. Ears perk up if you are on Part D. So if you're on Medicare, this is where you have a glimmer of hope, because we're hoping, Novo Nordisk is hoping, that within the first half of 2024, you see some of that STEP trial data, the submissions they've made to the FDA, that you see approval for those comorbidities, osteoarthritis, and heart failure. So for those of you who struggle with either of those and you're on Part D, these are going to be sort of a backdoor way for some of you to get on Wegovy. If you're not diabetic, obviously you can't get access to Ozempic. So your access to Wegovy, it being only approved for the treatment of chronic obesity. And these are two comorbidities that should be added by the FDA by mid-year. So that is a glimmer of hope for my sweet, sweet friends on Medicare Part D that have to deal with all of those headaches. One of the interesting things is that Novo was touting, again, this is for their investors, but this is where, as a user of these medications and as a friend of thousands of people who are on them, you just roll your eyes. They've launched in 7 additional countries for Wegovy in 2023. 7 additional countries for Wegovy. The supply chain has been a complete mess, and there's the roller coaster of doses that this puts patients on, which is wrong. It's just morally wrong. I think there will be trials that will show, or data that will show down the road, that this really messes with people to have to yo-yo on their dosages and deviate from the dosage schedule because of these supplies. And it is absolutely reckless to be launching a medication when you can't serve the markets that you're already in. It just infuriates me, but it is reality, and that's where we're at. Some more interesting information about some of the clinical trials that they have going. You saw that they released some data about Icosema versus basal insulin. And so basically this is a combination of semaglutide and insulin, and they just put it up against regular insulin. And of course you saw a better reduction in A1C versus insulin alone. I think nobody's surprised by that outcome. I think what's really interesting is, you had these pharmaceutical companies touting, what a great thing they were doing for people by offering them cheaper insulin, which was all brought on by litigation, right? Not necessarily the goodness of their hearts, as if anybody expected that, right? But they did it because they know full well that GLP-1s are the breakthrough are a breakthrough treatment for diabetes, just like insulin was. And now you see studies showing that even in type 1 diabetics, that semaglutide can potentially preserve beta cell function. I mean, this is next level treatment beyond insulin. And so just absolutely, more great news about what a great molecule semaglutide actually is, especially for people with diabetes. On the obesity front, you see some really interesting information. Obviously, we have CagriSema, injectable CagriSema is in phase 3 clinical trials. And so those phase 3 clinical trials, I believe, wrap up at the end of 2024, which is really, really exciting. We're going to see readouts also for type 2 diabetes and chronic kidney disease, peripheral arterial disease, and then, the readouts of the phase 3 trials of CagriSema come in the second half of 2024. So that'll be really exciting. CagriSema, for those of you who don't know it, is cagrilintide plus semaglutide. Cagrilintide is an amylin agonist, just another hormone that it's working on to help reduce hunger in people. So they are really, really excited for this one. This is the one that I think that right now you see it's 2.0, right? It's their Wegovy 2.0. And so I think that they really see this as potentially rivaling tirzepatide, being a really, really strong rival to tirzepatide. But it's not the only rival they have to tirzepatide, because you heard today on the call about a dual agonist that they have. They have a GLP-1 GIP that is actually being tested in phase 1 trials as a once monthly injection. So it's very similar, acting on the same receptors as tirzepatide does, but in a once monthly shot. And so they fielded some interesting questions we'll get into later about, is a once monthly injection might be preferable to some, but how do you deal with side effects, right? Sort of the same question we were asking about the study that they did out of I think it was a Stanford School of Engineering with Novo Nordisk scientists injecting with a hydrogel, right? That would be like a once a quarter injection or something. Like, how do you deal with side effects when it's just in you, right? And then the titration schedule is just all raises a lot of interesting questions, but they do have that dual agonist, right? So that will come along down the road. So again, I did a video today kind of comparing the advent of these really powerful GLP-1s to the advent of cell phones, right? So early 2000s, you had smartphones coming online, and like you didn't really see manufacturers competing with each other at the time for market space. They were competing for capacity to be able to build these things, because they could see that these were going to become an indispensable part of people's lives. And I think that GLP-1 medicines, especially as it relates to the treatment of chronic obesity, that's what we're seeing in this pharmaceutical market right now. So you're not seeing really, of course, Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk are competitors, but at this point in the game, they're not competing for market share. The market's bigger than they can serve right now. What they're competing for is manufacturing capacity and the ability to build infrastructure to keep up with the demand for the drugs. Because right now they're selling every pen that they make, right? So the demand is there. It's higher than the supply even. So they're not competing with each other, similar to the cell phone industry in the past. And so as you see more of these medicines come online, even medicines from the same manufacturers that compete with their other options, it just opens up a whole world of opportunity for treatment tailored a little bit more to your unique needs. And I think that's what makes especially CagriSema really unique, acting on amylin. So they're also looking at an oral version of CagriSema, and they're progressing that into phase 1 trials. That's, I think you're seeing a shift here in a lot of these earnings calls, whether we're talking about Novo Nordisk or we're talking about Eli Lilly, to talking about the oral options of GLP-1s. And I think that's really because there's no way they're ever going to keep up with supply if they keep having to come out with these injector pens, right? the injector pens are just simply not a sustainable solution. So if you can develop an oral version of some of these medications, very similar to what they've done at Novo Nordisk with Rybelsus. Okay, so Rybelsus is just a pill form of Ozempic. I think that you're going to see a push, right? So you have Novo Nordisk putting oral amycretin, which is against just kind of how you would classify CagriSema, as a potential rival to orforglipron, the small molecule that Eli Lilly is putting forward. And a reason that I'm covering the Novo Nordisk calls now is honestly because this is as Cloakster said, this is a duopoly now, right? You have Novo Nordisk and you have Eli Lilly. Nobody else is playing in this space in a meaningful way yet. And so that's why we're going to cover these. And that's why it's hard to talk about one without talking about the other, because they kind of chase each other in the development of these medications. Moving on, there was a question and answer session. I'm kind of jumping around in my notes. I hope I'm not skipping anything that is super notable here. Big focus, obviously, on increasing capacity to make more Wegovy, because again, they're competing against themselves and their ability to get these medications manufactured. Let's talk some about the question and answer session. Some of it we've already kind of covered as I moved along here. So one of the questions, I think the biggest question that these investors had was in relation to the huge investments in infrastructure that Novo Nordisk has announced. And it was interesting because they were very hesitant to say and commit to exactly what these investments were going to entail. Now, they did detail that a while back when they announced their huge commitment, and I can't even remember how much money it was, but it was in the billions of dollars. Maybe $6 billion is kind of what rings a bell, into expanding manufacturing over in Europe for Novo Nordisk. I think what is interesting is they really did not want to answer what specifically they were going to be expanding. Obviously, active pharmaceutical ingredients was one that they touched on, but I think that, could they be telegraphing here that they see a pivot coming at some point? And I'm not entirely sure what they think that pivot will be, but it seemed like they did not want to answer that. I thought that was interesting. And I think maybe, just maybe, and this might be the glimmer of hope, like Jeremy's saying in the comments right now, Jeremy's saying, I'm paying $550 a month and I can't afford it anymore. You're going to see so much market share lost to other options, right? I'm just going to call them other options for sake of, but you all know what I mean when I say other options. People are going to turn to other options when they can't afford the branded options, right? And I think maybe what you see with the conversation shifting to oral treatments is that they see oral as being cheaper to manufacture and easier for people to get a hold of, right? And if they can maintain profit margins with a pill and bring down the cost for the consumer and match the efficacy, I think that's what they're trying to do. So I think you kind of see an arms race developing here between Lilly and Novo Nordisk to develop pill form treatments of incretin mimetic therapies, because I think this is going to unlock the key to accessibility, not only in the United States, but around the world. It's just not a sustainable endeavor to treat obesity, which has become an increasingly global problem, with these hard to manufacture pens. And so I think what we see is a little arms race developing. I wonder if maybe they're rethinking their strategy as to how to set everything up, but I'm just speculating at this point. I do really believe that you'll see an arms race develop over the oral incretin therapy options here in the next couple of years. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. That's the big stuff that I got from the Novo Nordisk call today. Huge emphasis on Wegovy, increasing capacity, increasing accessibility, but they're just absolutely making money hand over fist. If you saw my video earlier this week, Novo Nordisk actually acquired a company. They were asked about this, but they said that they'll be answering questions about this in the future. They acquired a company earlier this week, and the name escapes me of the company. It's like Aerocal, I think. I'm going to go with Aerocal. I think that's what it was. And Aerocal has a molecule in development that in rodents decreased rodents' weight by 20% in 2 weeks. 20% in 2 weeks. That doesn't even sound possible. And obviously, it's not been proven to be humanly possible yet. It's been proven to be rodently possible. So those are obviously two different things. But you just think about that potential there. Obviously, I don't think they could ever bring something to market that caused people to lose weight that fast. It would be just devastating on your body to lose weight that fast. But if they can find a way to isolate it and slow it down, make it not quite as potent, to my knowledge, this is not an incretin therapy. So this is a whole new ball game. But, they just nonchalantly threw, $250,000 at this asset. And so the question is, did they do that to buy the platform because it's a biopharmaceutical company that they can maybe buy some intelligence, or was it for that specific molecule? So it's an exciting time to be to be following obesity medicine. If you didn't get a chance to catch that video, check it out. I'm not sure I've put it on YouTube, but it's over on TikTok. I'll drop it over here on YouTube as well. But that's what I got for the Novo earnings call. It's think maybe the second one I've ever covered. So I'm not as familiar with these people, and the calls are a little bit harder to follow because people speak with an accent that's harder for me to decipher when they speak. And I'm just not as familiar with everything they're talking about. So it's harder to slow down and pay as much attention, but it was a fascinating call. I'll find a link to the transcript. If y'all want to go back, you can catch it by just going to novonordisk.com. It's linked there if you want to take a listen for yourself. It's about an hour long. But just a fascinating call, and I'm looking forward to doing Eli Lilly's here in the coming days. They're going to have their Q4 of 2023 earnings call, and then they're going to have their forward-looking statements to make as far as what's going on in the pipeline. So hopefully we'll learn a little bit more about the phase 3 trials of retatrutide. Hopefully we'll learn a little bit more about orforglipron, and maybe, just maybe, we'll hear a little bit more about the potential for the quick pens to come to the United States. The single pen, kind of like the Ozempic pen, where all 4 of your monthly doses are in one pen, or the single dose vials. I really think in order for them, if they're writing 40, here's my bold prediction, right? If Eli Lilly is writing 40,000 scripts of Zepbound a week, we're about to see single dose vials of Mounjaro very quickly in the United States. That is just a prediction on my part. If they're going to keep up with supply, that's how they're going to do it at this point. So obviously they just told the United Kingdom that they could bring Mounjaro immediately to market there if they had the quick pens approved. They approved them, and in the United Kingdom, they're going to have accessibility to Mounjaro very soon. And so it opens up another market. And you see the 12.5 is in shortage here, right? Official FDA shortage. That's not even, anecdotal. It's in FDA shortage currently. And so take that for what it's worth. I hope that this video was helpful. I hope that this was entertaining, and I hope that it was informative. If it was, would you just hit that like, hit that bell, and hit that sub? If you're on the podcast, give it a 5-star rating and review. If you're just here and you didn't know that I had a podcast, check it out. It's called The Weekly Dose. On the pen, The Weekly Dose. You can even ask your spy device, hey, Alexa, play On the Pen, The Weekly Dose podcast. And your spy device will play the podcast. So hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider leaving it a like, comment, and we will catch you on the next stream.